Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to this Futures seminar. I'll be your host today. My name is Simon and I'm a senior advisor and futurist here at the Institute. To those of you who might not know who we are an independent, non-profit think tank. We work across the spectrum of future studies and foresight advisory, and we've been doing that for more than 50 years since our founding back in 1969. I have personally worked with strategic foresight and futures thinking for the past 7 years, and I've been fortunate enough to actually work with many great organizations, many great corporations around the world on applying foresight to different societal and business challenges. But I'm almost certain that it isn't because of me that you tuned in today. I'm sure you tuned in because of our outstanding guest lineup. So our Futures seminar is titled Strategic Foresight Principles, a roundtable with world-leading corporate practitioners on how to apply foresight. And the corporate practitioners who will share their first-hand insights are Joanna Lepore. She is the Global Foresight Director at McDonald's. Then we have Ludvig Liljekvist with us. He's the Global Innovation Insights and Foresight Lead at IKEA. And then we have Jaana Hyvärinen. She's the team lead for strategic foresight at KONE. We'll get back to our guests in a very short while. We know at the Institute, both from research and from our own first-hand experiences, that organizations that have a culture of strategic foresight, they do perform better in times of change. But strategic foresight as an actual organizational activity, if you will, it's not as commonly practiced as many might think. But for obvious reasons, it seems like there's been somewhat of a renaissance in recent years, and we're seeing that strategic foresight is rapidly emerging as an essential tool in strategic planning. So when we talk about strategic foresight, I personally see that so much of the work in the foresight field is super strong on visioning, super strong on scanning and on mapping trends, and super strong on forecasting and so on. But I think that it's relatively weak on action and relatively weak on execution and the whole bridging from foresight in a way that informs strategic decision making. And that is partly why we at SIFS have compiled a set of 10 principles for strategic foresight. We have it in a neat document brochure, if you will, like this. And that sort of serves as the foundation for how we approach strategic foresight as a discipline at the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies. So we've compiled and refined these principles from our own extensive experience, obviously, but we've also drawn inspiration from other thinkers and practitioners within the field of foresight. I'm sure that during today's conversation we'll cover many of these aspects in some way, and we'll happily obviously share our publication after the seminar. So, in a nutshell, I would say that the plan today is to provide you with actionable learnings, with real-life examples and knowledge on how to create business value from strategic foresight as an actual organizational activity. And our guests, as you figured, obviously all represent organizations with relatively large scale and relatively comprehensive foresight setups. But it's super important for me to underline the fact that extensive setups are not necessarily needed to benefit and to learn from strategic foresight. I bet you that every organization or every team is capable of developing, I would say, simple processes that gives you the ability to better anticipate the future. So I think we should get to it. Obviously, as we go along, please go ahead and post your questions in the chat, and we'll do our best to actually address some of them along the way. So let's get to know our experts. I'll take a step back. Thanks so much, all of you, for being with us here. Joe, maybe let's start with you. Would you mind giving us a short introduction to yourself and to your foresight work?
Yeah, a short introduction to your foresight work. It's going to be a challenge for all of us, I think. So hi, everyone. Joanna Lepore. I'm an Australian in the US. I've been living in Chicago for 3 weeks and the US for over a year, and I'm the Foresight Director at McDonald's. Foresight and McDonald's sits inside of the global marketing organization. So we reach the entire global organization with our work, and we really feed into that mid to long-term planning. So prior to McDonald's, I was doing Foresight at Mars Wrigley. So I've moved from one fund category to another. But I sort of stumbled into Foresight, I would say, I sort of say like a little bit of a treasure hunter that wasn't looking for the treasure, because I didn't even realize that this thing could be a job. Obviously, the resurgence and the renaissance of Foresight helped with that. Prior to that, I was in consumer insights because I love really understanding human beings. And then prior to that, over 10 years in marketing, because I love making ideas come to life. And so my education's also completely disconnected from all of that. I studied writing and philosophy. So I'd say now more than ever, my degree is really coming into play. And I think that, just as a summary of how I would practice Foresight, I think it's all about clear and confident communication about the future, combined with what if and a little bit of creativity that leads to action.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Joe. Ludvig, your turn.
So good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So Ludvig Liljekvist, I'm at the IKEA Group, so-called. So it's the biggest, largest IKEA retailer in the world. But we also operate shopping centers, we also McDonald. But mostly we know for IKEA, as you know, the big blue blocks connected to maybe some of your markets. I work with the future thinkers for the group based on trying to inform both primarily strategies and innovation. I was born out of innovation, so that's why I also, similar to Joe, found the treasure of, I guess, the foresighting techniques together with other techniques to leverage, not to look so much to past and present, to make decisions about the future in relation to innovation and also then later on strategies and such. But today we practice, I think, foresighting across, it's more, as you were on to, Simon, a mindset around the company today that we formulate with the world around us, a much stronger point of view where we want the world to head. And I think that's my mission in being here today, to share a little bit on that. But
wonderful. Thank you so much, Ludvig. And we'll get back to the whole mindset thing, I promise you that. But let's have Jaana give a short introduction as well, please.
So good evening, everyone. My name is Jaana Hyvärinen, and I lead the strategic foresight team in KONE Innovation Unit. You might know KONE actually from elevators and escalators, but actually our mission is to improve the flow of urban life. And the vision is to create the best people flow experience. And I've been actually working for KONE now 7 years. I started in concepts and design. After that, I led shortly design research unit and then the global research unit in technology management team. We've been building the strategic foresight competence and processes from beginning of this year. Still learning about the process and best methods and ways of doing foresight in companies like KONE. I've been working in this field over 20 years in different multidisciplinary, cross-disciplinary research innovation projects. I've been working in academia, in private sector and public sector. And I look forward to the discussion today.
Wonderful. I'm even starstruck here in the studio. Thanks so much for being with us here today. I already get the feeling that, or I knew it beforehand actually, that all of you come from different angles to foresight. And obviously there are many different angles on how to work strategically with the future. And I would say foresight as a field clearly is expanding and evolving. I think one overarching thing for foresight is that we want to be able to better anticipate the future through what I would say is non-predictive and non-extrapolating approaches. So Joe, in your view, what is strategic foresight and what is your approach to this?
You're going to give me the hard first question. So what is strategic foresight? I've always said that strategic foresight, as it's placed inside of a corporation, needs to be tailored to what the organization needs and what the organization is ready for. So there's no one size fits all. And certainly when I came into foresight, there was no manual. You kind of had the academic practice of foresight. You had a lot of what the agencies and particularly trend agencies were providing. And then you had, what strategic planning is inside of an organization. And those three things are very different. So the way that we practice it inside of McDonald's it's a midterm horizon to bridging of the gap between our short-term strategy in the organization, which is focused on 1 to 3 years, and more of that, horizon 3, projecting out what the future could be. We use a number of different methods to be able to do that. And certainly, as you said, it's not predictive and it's not extrapolating a linear trend out. It's definitely using foresight tools and methodologies. But the one thing that I always try to land with people when it comes to strategic foresight inside of corporations is actually well described with a comic that I saw yesterday. So I'm on a Futurist group where a bunch of futurists come together from the academic space and they talk, and I get a lot out of that. But they posted this comic where it had, directing people into 2 lines. One line was, come here for the simple but wrong answers. And this line over here, come here for the complex but correct answers. And so everybody, of course, goes to the simple answer. So I actually think that we as foresight practitioners inside of corporations sit in the middle to find a sweet spot in between. So the simple answer can actually be really helpful and impactful in an organization. And we need to make foresight, particularly the academic practice of foresight, more easy to understand for people and actionable. And bring in the complexity. So sometimes that complexity should sit behind the scenes versus actually being shown to the people who are making decisions. So I'd say, in summary, it's really practiced as a true Horizon 2 operator that's almost like the translator in between, what foresight is as a future study and what an organization, really needs.
What about you, Ludvig? Do you approach foresight slightly different than Joe, or is it the same?
No, I think we share probably a lot of different similar techniques and mindset. I think where I'm coming from, I realized pretty quickly that it's not for us to about our approach is not, or my approach is not about predicting part as much as kind of advocating for the agency humans have in shaping the future we want. So a lot of my work, it is from understanding where we've been and where we want to go, and where we want to go, and trying to populate that a little bit more than just with numbers, and trying to create those worlds and multiple futures. And I think a lot of the work has been developed through what we have is our vision, which is about to create a better everyday life for the many people. And the later part of that one, what is the everyday life for the many people in different types of future and different times of time horizon, has been probably the more effective way to bring people on board to what future thinking is, and to then democratize that towards the people making decisions, because we're more than 150,000 co-workers of people working in IKEA and IKEA. So how do we make it very accessible to them to make better decisions for a better future, and not to trying to be on like a one person futurist telling everyone what the future is, but much more make it much more inclusive. And we kind of developed techniques and tested things that didn't work and worked around that. But I think our approach is very much in line with the vision and values, and then how that informs the group and group companies in the strategic work, short-term horizon. I think Joe was in horizon 1, 2, but also I started in horizon 3 thinking. If you're into that horizon, that's where we're born, because none of the existing products we had could inform us with the type of moonshot innovation. We couldn't find any, like should I say, we couldn't be on the front foot. And then foresighting techniques was one way to get on top of the innovation, at least for the work. And then we developed from that point.
So Ludvig, let's just get this off the way real quick. Both you and Joe refer to Horizon 1, 2, and 3. What do you mean by that? Help our audience out.
Do you want to go, Joe?
So Horizon 1 for us is 1 to 3 years. Horizon 2 is in that 5-year and then Horizon 3 is 10-year. And obviously that terminology changes depending on the industry that you're in. So if you're in the government politics space, then that Horizon 3 is going to be more like 4 decades. So I think, again, it needs to be tailored to how your company looks at horizons.
So I also hear you say that obviously Foresight should go beyond the traditional strategic planning horizon, which is Horizon 1, right? Jaana, let's hear you. How do you approach Foresight? Do you come from a different angle than Joe and Ludvig?
Yeah, well, we operate in business context and also in context of built environment. So I would say that the horizon is a bit longer. For example, the building life cycle is tens of years or hundreds of years. So we need to understand the whole life cycle of a building or whole life cycle of our own product. In that sense, we also look a bit further in the future. Then I would say that our background is really heavily related to design thinking and design and co-creation together with our customers and partners. So it's also about kind of co-creating the future and making the future happen and making it tangible by utilizing, for example, different design methods when communicating the potential futures. Also, we have been working, or many of my team members have been working on the academic side. So it's about collecting and analyzing the data in a quite systematic way to provide kind of the background for the creativity. So combining data and creativity, it's a key. And kind of collaborating in ecosystems or with different partners, not only internal partners, but actually also external partners.
Perfect. Ludvig, tell me why is it important to work with strategic foresight as a global business?
As a global, I come back to the agency part. Agency in shaping, we have size in what we are doing and how we can reach the many people and how we want to reach the many people. And we can use that agency for good and bad. And I think the vision and values of IKEA and INCA is about creating something better for people and planet. So of course, exercising that agency would be at least the most important, very purposeful for me to be with this company, and also making that available to others to ingrain that in their decision processes for whatever decisions they're making in relation to strategy, team, markets, or products or such. And I think it's just a time of the time we're in now. If you look at where people are, there's COP27, Egypt has just ended. We see maybe the outcome and commitments not being to the level we want for a better future. So even more now, I believe big companies, all companies, together with governments and the many people, need to come together and kind of shape the future we would like to have, and not just accept the future we're kind of we are given now. And I think from a global business perspective, we have a responsibility in doing so as we are kind of moving towards the future.
Wonderful. And just to build on that a little bit, Joe, this might be the most obvious question of today's session, but do you feel that the agency around Foresight has changed in recent years as the world has become more wicked, if you will?
I think the world has always been wicked. But I would say yes and no, just not to be a fence sitter, but I think that the pull and the interest for Foresight is definitely greater or more evident. I think that there is still, we're still at a point where we're trying to work out how to really leverage Foresight in corporations. So I think that the agency piece is really critical. Like Ludvig said, exercising that agency is really, really challenging. So because you have a dedicated Foresight function doesn't mean that it has agency. Just because you are doing planning doesn't mean it's feeding into the planning that the business is doing. So collaborating and connecting the dots is really, really critical. And I would say also connected to what the team said before, having or creating a futures vision is very different to creating an action plan. And that's where, you get these questions about, what is Foresight generating? What are your case studies? What's your ROI? So if you're not able to actually lead the business to a roadmap of what they can do, and I think a roadmap towards innovation is definitely, one quantifiable avenue. Foresight for McDonald's, we sort of sit across a number of different functions in the organization. So we did a supply chain workshop last week. In a couple of weeks, I'm going into corporate relations. So their action plan is going to look very different, but it's really important to, you know, make sure that we're connecting into the parts of the business that can actually generate something very tangible. And then, of course, the challenge is, again, you know, we're creating longer term futures and we're helping to bridge the gap between what is and what could be. And so we need to make sure that those action plans aren't always anchored in that horizon one or the preferred futures for our organization, but really stretching our thinking into, you know, the what could be and what do we want to actually leave behind as our legacy. So it's a big challenge, but you know, definitely if you've got that kind of mindset, which I think everyone on this call definitely does, it's a challenge worth tackling.
Yeah, and I'll circle back to the whole thing around also making sure that the mindsets sort of goes throughout the organization. I'll circle back to that, but I want to actually hear you, Jaana, if we can become a little bit more concrete around sort of tangible outcomes, if you will, because when we were preparing this call, you told me that that your foresight unit, or at least your formalized organizational foresight work at KONE is rather new, right? So I would love if you could share some of the learnings of venturing out on a corporate foresight journey like this. What has gone well, and what are some of the challenges you've encountered?
Yes, so we started in the beginning of this year, and we are part of the innovation unit. So currently we see foresight as the first step of our innovation process, where we try to understand how the world and our operating environment is changing. And I would say that kind of inviting different parts of the organization to create the knowledge around the changes in the operating environment is key, so that everyone can kind of feel that they own the project and also kind of can participate, for example, in the environmental scanning and collecting the signals and trends and data and analyzing them together with the foresight experts who can kind of facilitate the knowledge creation. And it's a learning by doing process. So also kind of learning the futures thinking and futures making kind of ideology in different units. So for example, in our case, we are collaborating with our marketing, with our R&D units, with our business lines. And not all of the people are familiar with the foresight approach. So it's important to create also a common language when speaking about the future and the concepts related to foresight. And this is sometimes a bit challenging, but as said, project by project, we are all learning how to do it and what are the kind of best practices and methods to be used. And for example, from the kind of more creative side, we are really kind of trying to utilize, for example, design fiction and designerly ways of kind of communicating the potential futures. So even with people with different kind of backgrounds and different needs and goals, it's quite easy to kind of communicate the complex issues when you are creating this kind of more tangible objects from the future.
But I think this is extremely fascinating, and I want to stay with you a little bit here, Jaana, because KONE obviously is an old company, right? And what did you do before with foresight, and why what has changed? How did you work with foresight before? Was it just less formalized, or what happened?
I would say that it was not so kind of continuous process. So it was done in beginning of certain projects, for example, but now we are trying to develop a really continuous process that everyone can be kind of part of the making the future and trying to create methods and processes so that everyone can contribute in different phases of the project. And now when we are in the innovation unit, it's also kind of, as said, about innovating together with our partners and customers, and also collaborating, for example, with academia when defining research and innovation topics. It might be sometimes difficult in industry academia collaboration to define kind of shared goals and topics, but actually, for example, scenario work can help in that. So really understanding about the future research needs to be able to get the right results that might be kind of applicable in 10 or 15 years. So even utilizing this when collaborating with the research projects.
Wonderful. I think it'll be interesting for our audience also to know, maybe starting with you, Joe, where is your Foresight work? Where's your Foresight unit anchored in McDonald's?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because it is quite different depending on the organizations that you speak with. So inside of McDonald's, we sit inside of our customer team, essentially, which sits underneath marketing. So we are in the global function. So we have a responsibility to make sure that our work is globally relevant. And we have a responsibility to make sure that it connects in very clearly to the customer. So not only how it's benefiting the customer and creating those feel-good experiences that our company is dedicated to creating, but also how it connects to other people like our crew members, our franchisees, our entire global organization of marketers, insights people, the digital team, the restaurant team, the innovation team. So we are centrally located to be able to make an impact across that entire customer journey. But short answer, we sit inside of marketing.
What about you, Ludvig? You might not sit in marketing, correct?
No, not anymore. Once I was there, but these days I'm together with a unit called a group function called Strategy Development Innovation. So I think that's where we landed one pocket of the foresighting capability. Then it sits across different type of companies as across the group, I should say. But I think it's originally from us. It's originated from I think the need for something different to see the world differently using foresighting techniques. It comes through innovation, as mentioned before. Then slowly it adapted towards strategy as well, and I think it comes primarily when you kind of combine futures which are less risky for strategies to point towards. So that's also a learning that we found that not having dystopian futures arise through possible projected or possible future. It's not the way to point strategies towards us and inform those. Much more towards the innovation, and we saw a lot of that through the first kind of reaction towards that. But then I think it's, I think now it's innovation and strategy, but it also transcends beyond that to the many people making decisions today in teams, people and teams, and even markets who needs to kind of radically transform. So I think it needs to become democratized. And I think the way to do that is the way how we speak about it. It's the same with speaking to design thinkers or innovators that use design technology or design thinking methodologies. We need to kind of make foresight easier for people to react to and work with.
So I'll stay with you here, Ludvig, because I find this really, really interesting. And obviously, I think all of us agree that successful strategic foresight is obviously meant in some way and in some capacity to enhance decision making, right? And in that sense, your foresight obviously needs to be connected to strategic purpose, at least most of the time. But at the same time, of course, the ones making the strategic decisions must obviously be convinced about the soundness and the relevance of the foresight work that's carried out. How do you find the right balance here where you both are able to sort of challenge organizational conventional wisdom, but you still secure the buy-in? Is that difficult to find that balance, Ludvig?
Yes, I think you framed it well. Yes, it is, of course. And I think the way to kind of meet people on the journey is also to meet them halfway. And I think one of the ways we use is the vision. We're trying to understand what everyday life is. And by having the vision and value very connected and kind of anchored in the process and method and also the output of the work, that's the first thing to get everyone kind of connected to the work we're doing. Then we develop from that one to say, looking at different futures, projected and preferable futures has been the futures that kind of align best to both a realistic future, but also a future which we all want to kind of pass on, which I think it's super important. When you have futures and you have people to come talk to, it is about how do you make it accessible to them. I think a designer once told me, like, if you want to reach many, design many different formats. And we kind of adopt this similar to, I think, Jaana on KONE, that design fiction and storytelling techniques to make it very, at one point, accessible through those kind of stories about the future and how to live your life in different types of future, but even so allowing people to engage with it and create their own vision and story of that future. And that's a journey to bring people on to whatever they work in, because all strategic people in a company will work with where are we, where do we want to go, and how do we get there. And foresighting, I think, is the way to kind of embed where do we want to go and give more context to that point. And I think that's where I see the ingredients, at least, to answer your question, Simon.
Yeah, over to you, actually, Jaana. Do you often find strategic foresight, especially in a new function like yours, do you find strategic foresight a difficult sell to people who are more practiced and more comfortable maybe in sort of what I would call evidence-based strategic thinking?
No, actually, I would say that the buy-in is there, but it's sometimes kind of difficult to understand the expectations or the kind of find the common language, as I said earlier, so that they know that what strategic foresight is about and what kind of outcomes they can expect from the project. So that it's, as said, learning by doing, also kind of sharing the insights and the way of thinking when applying the strategic foresight in different units, and understanding that what are the actionable outcomes from for different audiences. So I would say that it's not difficult to sell the idea or get the partners inside the organization to participate to our projects, but especially if there are kind of many different units collaborating, they all need to get kind of interpretation from the future for themselves so that it's actionable. So it's kind of facilitating the learning.
Perfect. So all of you are touching upon this whole sort of cultural aspect, organizational cultural aspect around foresight, strategic foresight. Joe, what are the main ingredients to nurture a culture of foresight?
Yeah, I mean, I think that some of the points that were hit on before, particularly Jaana's point about learning and making sure that people feel like they're a part of the process, so they're learning as you're teaching them, and they're embedding that into what they do and how they do what they do, is really, really critical. I think that foresight. People have the buy-in is there. People want foresight, but they don't know what they're buying is how I would describe it. So I think that the credibility piece is really, really important. So the ingredient of actually anchoring what you do in proper foresight practice and proper foresight theory is absolutely critical. So when you're coming in to a setting where people don't really know what to expect from foresight, and they probably have hired you in the business to inspire them or to provoke them, how do you bring in more credible, quantifiable, future studies based methodologies into what you're doing, and then obviously teach, don't show, but guide them towards building their own skills in futures thinking. So getting them really curious about what could be, getting them curious about what's happening outside of the category, outside of the industry. How are these things connected? How could one influence another? Getting them to be thinking in that way. I mean, foresight is really about preparation and planning. So planning is all about, helping people to think about, if this happens, maybe that could happen, or how are these things connected? How do they contrast and collide to create possible futures? And that's where, something like scenario planning can be really helpful. Fringe mapping can be really helpful. So I'd say it's really definitely a combination of having the credible, proper futures tools, and making sure that your team is trained in those tools and not just relying on external agencies to provide the foresight knowledge for you. And then a little bit of that, not hand-holding, but teaching and guiding, so that, ultimately foresight doesn't just sit with your team and your part of the business off to the corner, doing God knows what, as people might see it, but really foresight is embedded into what everybody is doing.
Yeah, I guess the way that I see it also is that foresight should be part of most processes in a business, but not all processes should be foresight processes, right? And I think that I think Ludvig said this already, there's a huge distinction between sort of having the approach to foresight that we're trying to predict anything, or using it as a planning tool, a preparation tool, an anticipation tool, as Joe is highlighting here. Anyway, Ludvig, in my personal opinion, it doesn't make much sense to talk about foresight without also talking about the mindsets and the biases that we all have. You touched upon it already. I've experienced that doing strategic foresight also means working with people who all have their own beliefs and who all have their own often misguided assumptions about what the future holds. How would you go about actually cultivating this futures thinking or this foresight mindset in your team?
Very good question and hard, but I think part of it could be a couple of things. One thing is, of course, I think talking about the future, you always need to start in the past and present. And I think looking at the past and present on a very high level, the Anthropocene and the Great Acceleration, there are certain things that could be derived that can land people on where we're coming from and possibly where we're heading, and then relying on science. I think the first one is more bit educational and learning both ways, I think, to get people on board and make it easy and fun. It doesn't have to be hard. It's not reading big reports. It needs to be much more easy for people to get along. Then from there on, you could probably going to find ways to look at the future. You can inspire them. Science fiction, climate fiction, all sorts of things. There's so many good ways that you combine both science and fiction and makes people really move their hearts and brains by that. And I think that's the second part. Find ways to really engage them in the future and different types of future and get them rigged towards that with a mindset. And then you need to kind of move them along to motivate them. And I think when motivating them, it's much more about when they adopt these kind of tools, and Joe and Joanna was on the tools and ways of using these techniques, there are some simple, easy ways for them to kind of create, share, and collaborate around different types of future thinking. We all do it every day. We all make decisions today about what I'm going to do this weekend. And especially these times, we think about the future probably a lot more than 10 years ago, possibly. So I think humans have that capacity of imagination to imagine futures. So we should kind of tap into that with every people and make them imagine their own future and which future they would like. And I think that could probably be how you get people like in the end get rid of myself as a practitioner. Like I just happen to be here working with this now. But I think we all have the capacity to kind of exercise the superpower of future thinking. It's not too hard. Children are very good at it. So we should all kind of learn from them and continue doing that in the work.
Very, very inspiring. I'm going to throw a curveball here real quick because all of you have mentioned different tools and you've actually also named the different tools along the way. So I'm going to ask each one of you to give me your top 2, top 3 favorite tools for our audience. Maybe Joe, you want to start? Your top tools for strategic foresight.
My absolute favorite is fringe mapping. And if I could just do that as a hobby in my spare time, I would. Sometimes I do. And then the other one that I really find quite helpful is the cone of plausibility, particularly in helping to connect what the business is looking at today with where it might go.
Perfect. I think that's super helpful for our audience. Jaana, same question for you.
Design fiction and creating artifacts from the future. So really creating kind of tangible futures, and then co-creation workshops together with different internal and external stakeholders.
I love that co-creation. I would say any day that foresight should be a collective intelligence exercise, right? You can't really study the future on your own and hope to learn much worthwhile. It's the whole co-creation, right? Ludvig, your favorite tools?
I'm so lucky to go last because they took some on mine, but then I can build on that one. I think I like design thinking, and within design thinking, I like emergent called transition design, which goes beyond design thinking. Design thinking is solving for a human problem, but solve for system transition, which I think we need in the present today for a better future. So transition design, I think new design thinking perspectives. Second one is world building. I exercise that a lot from the entertainment industry. It's to build future worlds. And from that, trying to kind of then position our business or a business idea or whatever company, how are we relevant or how are we part of shaping that future So much more outside in. So world building techniques. And then the one I think Jaana was onto it as well. I practice a lot of imagination and storytelling, and doing that in a co-creating setting where you invite people to imagine what a better future could be, or imagine something, then it becomes their own. It becomes their own. They are much more of an ambassador of both the tools and mindset, that you kind of move them beyond a point. And I think so storytelling techniques or imaginary techniques would be my third one.
Wonderful. Let's stay a little bit concrete here still. So, Joe, you already touched upon the different time horizons here. A question for you would then be, when does the future start?
Oh gosh, why do you always throw to me the hard ones to go first? When does the future start? It starts when we're ready for it. I think obviously there is no one future. The possibilities are not endless, but there are a lot of possibilities. I think what's really powerful, when I first came into Foresight, is helping the organizations, like previously at Mars and now at McDonald's, to think about the future as not being set. So you're not just, it's not yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Tomorrow is just going to happen however it happens. But there are not only multiple possibilities in how things might eventuate, but there's also multiple actions that you can take that influence that future. And I say that with great honor coming from the McDonald's side, because we are, a huge organization. We are the market leader. The decisions that we make are going to influence not just our industry, but they're going to influence millions, billions of people around the world. So let's make our decisions carefully, and let's use Foresight to inform them. But let's also, I think what the others were touching on is, let's get people inspired and imagine what could be and how you could create that from within the organization.
I'm so happy I asked you that question. Wonderful answer. And the reason actually, from my end, the reason I actually asked that question is, from my experience working with different organizations, is that when you look on Horizon 1, as you also alluded to before, the traditional, would you say, strategic planning horizon, 1 to 3, maybe to 5 years max, then it very, very easily becomes path dependent, the way that we approach the future. If we go further out, Horizon 2, maybe even Horizon 3, it allows for greater mental flexibility to actually acknowledge the fact that the future might come together in complex ways that we're not able to imagine. And that's basically why I asked the question as well. A few last questions before we'll invite questions from the crowd here. Jaana, where do you see Foresight heading as a discipline and as a function within your organization?
As a function within our organization, as said, it will be a continuous process, not project-based way of working, and involving all the different global and frontline units kind of collaboratively, understanding that what are the key drivers for the future, and also creating the future together with the internal and external stakeholders. So I would say that it's heading towards kind of ecosystem way of working.
And Ludvig, on a more holistic view here, where do you see the discipline of Foresight? Where do you see that heading?
Oh, very good question. I think it's the discipline of Foresight. I think it will come to be much more well known and well exercised through companies, because I think it's just the fact that the world seems to move quicker and faster, exponential in so many ways that we haven't seen before. So relying on past and present is not as important as trying to understand what could be the future. And I think that's just going to suggest it's going to become much more connected to decision making in every aspect. And I think agency, or should I say states, governments, and others will much more in the future demand bigger transformation in ways where we saw through the pandemic and other types of black swan events. But that's just going to demand, Foresight is going to be tied much tighter towards, I think, everyday operational decisions that we haven't seen. It wouldn't be solely for innovation and strategy, what we could think further ahead, because the future is closer and it's already here. So I think that's just going to make it much more, it seems to become much more important for decision making these days. And then we need to kind of make it accessible for them and not speak languages they don't understand. So I think that
not speaking languages no one understands. I think that's super, super important. Joe, last question, final question for you. What advice would you give people who are interested in working much more with foresight in their organizations, but who might find it difficult because their organizations might not have this sort of organizational culture we talked about that is foresight friendly, if you will? What's your best piece of advice?
Oh, my best piece of advice. So I would say, first and foremost, I would say learn the foresight practice. Don't come into it thinking that you have it all worked out. So forums like this, I think, are really helpful. And, there are a number of free sources on the internet that you can use to educate yourself, connect in with other foresight practitioners. You didn't ask me that last question, but I really wanted to answer it, so I will now anyway, just being sneaky. But I think that the future of foresight is collaborative and democratized, and forums like this where we can come together with other people doing the same job who are trying to, make it impactful and trying to make it robust and, proper but relevant. I think is incredibly helpful. So I'd say connect in with as many people as you can. And then, leverage the pool of foresight. So people are really interested about what the future could hold. They're interested about trends. They're seeing these signals, these same signals that you're seeing in the organization, and they're asking, what does this mean? Is this here to stay? How is it going to impact my brand? Is this something that I should be acting on? So help them answer those questions and just really lean into that, that natural curiosity that we do have about, the what if and, that imaginative thinking that we do have as humans. So
how poetic. Future of foresight. I love that. Final question for all three of you. Let's end on a rhetorical question, right? Is foresight something that everyone can learn to work with? Yes or no?
yes.
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 And a big yes from me as well. I'll turn to some questions from the audience. Thanks so much for sharing your insights. And let me just have a look at my screen here. We have a question from Xavier, and he's alluding to the whole horizon thing here again. So he's asking, how far do you actually go in describing a Horizon 3 future based on research, trends, and insights versus sort of setting a context and allowing strategic decision to envision and dream? So how much can you actually have trends and research and insights inform your Horizon 3, and how much of that is visioning and dreaming, if you know what I mean? Maybe that's for you, Joe.
Oh, I feel like that would be for Ludvig.
Ludvig, okay, go ahead.
Follow. Go on, do you want to take that one?
Thank you, Joe. Yes, no, I think it's good. I think on the horizon, the horizon models and things. Models are simplified views of the world, so we should remember that. But I guess thinking of horizon, whatever time horizon we're in, I tend to go 10 years out, and I think that's commonly practiced because that's close enough to all of us kind of experience it, but close enough to see exponential development happening. If you're going to kind of space opera, like 100 to 300 years into the future, then you will go into imaginary points where science fiction and other things been right about things when they kind of converge and let you dream big about things. There are certain things I think that the pace layering of development on Earth, some things like nature and others move not so quick, where like fashion and other moves quicker. And I think you could be more certain about certain things in 100 years than you could be in the next 1 year. So I think you can probably leverage different type of perspective in the scope you want to be dreaming and kind of imagine. Because what will happen tomorrow, nobody really knows, but not even in 100 years. But some things be certain in 100 years. So I would probably, I'm not sure I'm answering the question, but imagination plays into all horizons. Joe?
Can I build on that? I think that's so right. And my only build would be, what is the purpose of the exercise, and really design for that. So if the purpose of the Horizon 3 is to aid in planning and therefore in decisions that you're making today for that Horizon 3, then you need to make sure those scenarios that you're painting or the possibilities are not catastrophic or the absolute extremes or the absolute, negative or positive scenario. That should be realistic and plausible, if not possible. And if the purpose is to actually just open people's minds and to spark imagination and get them thinking about the what if, maybe get them outside of their own bias of how the future might unfold, then it's a very different exercise that you're going to design. So I'd say design for the purpose.
Perfect. So this next question, actually, I also wanted to ask that to Ludvig, but I'm going to ask it to Jaana instead. Because Ludvig, you already mentioned the whole hearts and brains of Foresight, right? And there's a question here from, well, I'm asking it to you, Jaana, just so you know. But there's a question from Cecilia here. She's asking, to what extent do you use immersive aspects of if you're building future scenarios? In other words, do you have artifacts? What are some of the things you use to bring those futures alive so they invoke emotion and not just come across as sort of logic futures, if you know what I mean?
Yes, so we are experimenting, for example, with the artifacts from the future, so design approaches like speculative design or speculative architecture to really kind of make it tangible and also kind of experiencing, for example, the trends or the changes, so even kind of acting out the different scenarios and making that in that way kind of it more experiment kind of easier to experience actually the scenario world, for example. But, and of course then utilizing different kind of storytelling methods and what visualizations and making kind of more visual scenarios.
Perfect. There's one more question here from Elstract. It's very much on sort of the horizon scanning part of things, the trend exploration part of things here. It's actually addressed to all three of you, so let's see who grabs this. How do you three use trend research specifically within your strategic foresight process? What kind of role does trend research play? Go for it, Ludvig.
All right, thank you, Simon. No, I think we use it. However, weak signals, trends, megatrends, we do populate our futures world building framework with different types of trends and content based on desktop primary and secondary research. I think it's when it becomes interesting for us is when we built up those trends. And to be honest, megatrends and things, it is one reason from an innovation. If one of the purposes towards innovation to be on the front foot, for example, then you might not want to be seeing the world as everyone else is doing, your competitors and others. And then we leverage, I think, we find new techniques where we combine these kind of trends together with the points of view of the many people. And the many people could be experts around the world. It could be, we use a lot of youth and co-workers to have their point of view. What is not so much maybe the projected future, we have experts having their trends surface there, but even more so in a preferable future, we have the many people and youth and experts agree what is a preferable future. And that's how we kind of come back to the purpose from an agency that they would then exercise. We could then be certain that it's much more of an inclusive, just future. And that's not so much of kind of, should I say, scaling already existing solutions, maybe in a preferable future, which the youth and experts agree we should be doing regenerative agriculture, for example, or permaculture. They come together on that, and that becomes our point of view or trend into that. But that's how we do it. I'm sure the others might do it similar or different.
Joe, Jaana, do you want to pitch in on how you use trend research, horizon scanning concretely, real quick?
Well, I can add. We are, as said, developing kind of continuous process for collecting the trends and also kind of crowdsourcing the approach of collecting and understanding collecting the signals and trends and analyzing the kind of impact, for example, for our customers and our own operating environment. So in that sense, and there are of course interesting ways of utilizing, for example, AI in different phases of foresight process, from the environmental scanning to creating the scenarios and visualizing the future worlds.
It's super interesting how AI actually starting to sort of become more integrated in foresight processes and in scanning the environment or scanning the horizon. Final question here from the audience. That one's for you, Joe. How do you measure/visualize business impact from your foresight function for the short to midterm horizon? any techniques to get buy-in from executives to allocate budget to establish the Foresight unit. So how do you sort of, how do you visualize that you're actually making a business value difference here?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it from a business planning perspective, just put that hat on, I would say. What would you normally do if you went in Foresight? You would size it. Now, it might be indicative and it might be evolving and it might be in multiple iterations, but here are the opportunities. Here's the potential industry slash size for the product that you're potentially launching. Here's the risk of not doing and the potential blind side if you don't invest in this area. I think sizing is really, really important. Using AI to help you to map the landscape and then overlaying more of that human element to it, I think is also really, really helpful. So you're visualizing what the opportunity is, but then you're also overlaying the human impact to it, which I think is a responsibility of Foresight practitioners to really link it to that human need and human behavior. And then I would say, really think about linking it into where your business wants to go. So it's really, really helpful if you can say, well, our business is, one of the key pillars of growth, like it is for our organization, is to, stretch our arms into the space of digital. What does that mean across the consumer journey that we're operating in? This is an enabler, or this is potentially a risk if we don't invest in these areas. And then again, make it really real, make it tangible, and make it human.
Wonderful. We've reached the end of this webinar. Wow. Thank you so much, Jaana. Thank you so much, Joe. And thank you so much, Ludvig. Wonderful to have you with us. And thanks so much for inviting us sort of inside your organization who actually works concretely and actionable with Foresight. Thanks so much. Our next Future seminar is actually in less than 2 weeks from now on December the 2nd, because that's the World's Futures Day by UNESCO. So make sure to sign up for that one as well. Thank you all for tuning in, and please reach out if you wish to continue the conversation or if you have any questions. We're here to have the dialogue. Thanks so much for today.